The huge alien vessel drifted slowly toward Orbital Dock 9, leaving a trail of glittering debris in its wake. Captain Ju Park watched from the command center, her eyes fixed on the main screen. The ship's once proud hull was now scarred with burn marks, and several of its engine ports flickered erratically. "Another one," muttered Sunwoo, Juwoo's second in command. "That makes 3 this week." Juwoo nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And this one's bigger than the last 2 combined." The Eternal Vigilance was famous throughout the sector, a top-of-the-line battlecruiser built by the Trilari, beings who had mastered space travel when humans were still figuring out agriculture. Its approach to a human repair station would have been unthinkable just 5 years ago. "They're hailing us," said Do-Yun, the communications officer. His fingers moved quickly over the console. "Put them through," Ju said, straightening her uniform jacket. The screen changed to show the ship's commander. The alien had blue-tinted skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Despite the physiological differences, the worry on its face was unmistakable. "This is Commander Vrexel of the Trilari warship Eternal Vigilance. We request immediate docking and repair assistance." The alien's voice translator couldn't hide the desperation. "Our primary and secondary propulsion systems are failing. Our engineers cannot identify the cause." Ju kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt a spark of pride. "This is Captain Ju Park of Orbital Dock 9. We can accommodate your vessel. Sending docking instructions now." After the transmission ended, Sunwoo turned to her. "They're going to be embarrassed when we fix it in a day." "Don't get cocky," Ju warned, though she smiled. "Minjae, prepare Bay 4 for a Trilari-class battlecruiser, and tell Taeyong to assemble his best team." Engineer Taeyong Kim was already awake when his comm unit buzzed. He'd been tinkering with an old Earth motorcycle in his quarters, a hobby that helped him relax after long shifts. The message from Juwoo was brief. "Trilari battlecruiser, Bay 4. Your team. Now." 30 minutes later, Taeyong stood at the airlock with his 4 best engineers. Hyunwoo, Jihoon, Yeonju, and Minji all wore the standard gray coveralls of Dock 9, tools hanging from loops at their belts. "Remember," Taeyong told them, "they'll be defensive. No species likes admitting they need help, especially not the Trilari. Be respectful, but confident." The airlock cycled open, revealing 3 Trilari engineers. They towered over the humans, standing nearly 8 feet tall with their exoskeletal frames gleaming under the dock lights. "I am Chief Engineer Kalthur," said the one in the center. "Our ship requires assistance beyond our capabilities." The word seemed painful for him to say. Taeyong bowed slightly. "Taeyong Kim, lead engineer of Orbital Dock 9. We're honored to help. Could you show us to the main engine room?" The interior of the Eternal Vigilance was a marvel of engineering. Corridors of polished metal curved in mathematically perfect arcs. Every system displayed flawless design principles, or at least, they should have been flawless. The primary fusion drive began experiencing power fluctuations 3 days ago, Kalthur explained as they entered the massive engine room. "We performed standard diagnostics and found nothing." Then the secondary systems began showing the same pattern. Taeyong nodded, listening intently while his eyes scanned the equipment. The engine core rose before them like a cathedral, a towering pillar of interlinked systems pulsing with blue energy. It was beautiful, sophisticated, and clearly very sick. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the main control panel. Kalthur hesitated, then stepped aside. "Our diagnostic systems are the most advanced in the quadrant. They detect no faults." Taeyong didn't respond immediately. His fingers danced over the alien interface, while Minji and Yeonju circled the base of the engine core, their handheld scanners whirring softly. "Interesting," Taeyong murmured after several minutes. He turned to Hyunwoo. "Get the acoustic resonator from our kit." The Trilari engineers exchanged confused glances. "Acoustic resonator?" asked Kalthur. We've already checked all structural elements for vibration patterns. I'm sure you have, Taeyong said kindly. But sometimes the old ways work best. Hyunwoo returned with a device that looked primitive compared to the Trillary technology. Taeyong took it and pressed it against various points on the engine housing, listening through connected earpieces. The humans waited patiently while the Trillary grew visibly agitated. Finally, Taeyong stopped at a section near the upper manifold. "Here," he said simply. Ji-hoon climbed up the maintenance ladder and joined him, pressing his palm against the spot. "You're right. Feel that?" Calthor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of irritation. "There is nothing to feel. Our sensors detect no anomalies in that section." "With respect," said Taeyong, "your sensors are looking for what they expect to find. The problem is something they weren't programmed to notice." He pulled a small tool from his belt and carefully removed an access panel. Behind it lay a complex array of crystalline components, each glowing with inner light. "There," Taeyong pointed at one crystal that looked identical to the others. "This quantum regulator is out of phase with the others, by about 3 picoseconds." Calthor pushed forward to see. "Impossible. Such a minute discrepancy would create a cascading resonance pattern that grows over time," finished Minji. "Like a tiny pebble starting an avalanche." Taeyong nodded. "Your systems are too perfect, too efficient. When this regulator started slipping, the effect was so subtle your sensors filtered it out as background noise." The Trillary engineer stared at the component, all 4 eyes narrowed in concentration. "How did you know?" Taeyong smiled. "It sounded wrong. Human hearing isn't as accurate as your sensors, but we're good at noticing patterns that feel off, even when we can't immediately explain why." While the Trillary watched in silence, the human team carefully recalibrated the quantum regulator. It took 3 hours of delicate adjustments, but eventually the engine's pulsing blue light steadied, growing stronger and more consistent. Commander Vrexel joined them as they finished, accompanied by Captain Juwu. The alien commander's posture was notably different from when they first communicated, less rigid, more open. "Chief Engineer Calthor tells me you found a fault that our systems could not detect," Vrexel said. Taeyong shrugged. "Your systems are designed for perfection. Humans have always lived with imperfection, so we get good at spotting it." "The repair costs." "Standard rates," Juwu interrupted smoothly. "No rush charges, despite the emergency nature." The commander's 4 eyes blinked in synchrony. Surprise, not irritation. "That is generous." "We're neighbors in this galaxy," Juwu replied. "Today we help you. Tomorrow perhaps you help us." Later, as the Eternal Vigilance prepared to depart, Juwu and Taeyong stood at the viewport watching the massive ship. Its engines now glowed with steady, powerful light. "Word will spread," Taeyong said quietly. Juwu nodded. "It already has. We've received 6 new repair requests since they docked." "They don't understand us," Taeyong mused. "All these advanced species with their perfect technology. They never had to keep old cars running with duct tape and wishful thinking." Juwu laughed. "That's humanity's secret weapon. We expect things to break, so we learn how to fix them instead of being surprised when they do." The great battlecruiser's engines flared brilliantly as it pulled away from the dock, once again mighty and proud. As it vanished into the starfield, Juwu's comm unit chimed with yet another incoming request for repairs. Humanity had found its place among the stars not through superior technology or military might, but through something far more fundamental: the ability to fix what others thought was broken beyond repair. News of the Eternal Vigilance repair spread quickly. Within 2 weeks, Orbital Dock 9 had a waiting list. Today's challenge sat in Bay 3, a Naraxi scientific vessel with drive systems so advanced they supposedly couldn't fail. Yet here it was, dead in space. Taeyong Kim walked slowly around the alien ship's main engine core. The Naraxi engineers, tall, thin beings with 6-fingered hands, watched with a mixture of hope and doubt. Their chief engineer, Cahal seemed particularly skeptical. Our quantum stability field is perfectly calibrated, Cahal said. We've run every diagnostic. Taeyong nodded but kept moving. He wasn't looking at readouts or using scanners. Instead, he simply observed, occasionally reaching out to touch the smooth metal surfaces of the engine components. Hyunwoo and Minji followed behind him, carrying basic toolkits. They knew better than to interrupt Taeyong when he was in this state. The human engineer was reading the machine like others might read a book. The problem with perfect systems, Taeyong finally said, stopping at a junction point where several power conduits met, is that when they fail in ways their creators never imagined possible. He ran his hand along a seemingly perfect fusion manifold, pausing at a spot that looked identical to every other part. The metal was flawless, with no visible flaws or damage. Here's your problem, he said confidently. Microfractures in the quantum stability field. Saul made a sound that the translators interpreted as disbelief. Impossible. Our sensors would detect any fracture. Not these, Taeyong replied, tapping the spot gently. They're nonlinear fractures. They exist partially in normal space and partially in quantum space. The Niraxi engineers chittered among themselves in their native language, clearly doubtful. May I? Taeyong asked, holding up a simple, almost primitive-looking tool from his belt. Zal hesitated, then gestured permission. The human placed the device against the manifold and adjusted a dial. A low humming filled the air, rising and falling in pitch as he moved it slightly. Listen, Taeyong said, offering an earpiece to Exal. The alien reluctantly took it. After a moment, all 6 of the engineers' eyes widened in surprise. The resonance pattern is irregular, Zal admitted. Exactly, said Taeyong. The fractures create tiny quantum echoes. Your sensors filter them out as background noise because they're programmed to look for conventional damage patterns. Jihoon stepped forward with a portable welder that looked strikingly basic compared to the Niraxi technology. We'll need to stabilize the fractures before they spread. With that, Zal pointed at the human tool. Our materials require precision on the atomic level. Taeyong smiled. Sometimes the simplest tools are the best, especially when you know exactly how to use them. For the next 3 hours, the human repair team worked methodically. They used tools that looked outdated but applied them with exceptional skill. Sometimes they would stop, discuss among themselves, then try a different approach. Once, Taeyong even laughed and pulled a small roll of what looked like adhesive tape from his pocket. Is that tape? Sal asked, horrified. Special carbon nano-reinforced tape, Taeyong explained. Temporary fix until the molecular bond sets. The Niraxi engineers watched in fascination as the humans essentially improvised their way through a repair that, according to all their technical manuals, should be impossible without a complete replacement of the manifold. There, Taeyong said finally, stepping back. Try it now. Zal hesitantly activated the ship's diagnostic sequence. The engine core hummed to life, its energy readings climbing steadily until they reached optimal levels. The Niraxi's expression was unreadable to human eyes, but the conveyed their tone as shocked. It's functioning at 99.8% efficiency. How did you know? Taeyong shrugged. Human intuition, plus about 10,000 years of breaking things and fixing them again. Later, in the station's mess hall, Jinsu, a newer engineer, joined Taeyong and his team. I don't get it, she said. Why do these advanced species need our help? Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Taeyong sipped his coffee thoughtfully. It's because of how humans evolved as tool users. Look at our history. We never had a clean, logical progression of technology. We had false starts, dead ends, bizarre workarounds. The aliens got too good at the right answer, Hanwoo added. We got good at finding many possible answers. Minji laughed. Remember Earth history. We went from the Wright brothers' first flight to landing on the moon in just 66 years. That's technological chaos. Taeyong nodded. Most alien civilizations developed along streamlined paths. They perfected each technology before moving to the next. Humans, we jumped all over the place. We were using smartphones before we'd solved world hunger. And that's good, Jinsu asked. It means we think differently, Taeyong explained. Where they see a perfect system that can't be fixed without replacement, we see components, workarounds, possibilities. We expect things to break in unexpected ways. On the observation deck, Captain Ju Park was showing the Naraxi captain the various human repair techniques being applied to ships throughout the dock. Your engineers used adhesive tape on our quantum manifold, the alien said, still sounding bewildered. Ju smiled. Temporary solution while the molecular bond set. Saved you 3 days of work and about 20,000 credits. But it's so primitive. Humans have a saying, Ju replied. If it looks stupid but it works, it isn't stupid. She guided the alien captain to a window overlooking Bay 7, where humans were working on an enormous Kel collective transport vessel. The repair team wasn't using the dock's advanced fabrication facilities. Instead, they had laid out parts on the floor and were physically reconfiguring them. What are they doing? The Naraxi asked. The Kel's navigation system was designed for their nebula region. When they ventured into clear space, the stellar mapping algorithms couldn't adapt. Rather than replacing the entire system, our engineers are modifying it. But there are no schematics for such a modification. Ju nodded. Exactly. No blueprint, no manual, just human creativity. As they watched, one of the engineers made an adjustment, and the scattered parts suddenly lit up with a soft blue glow. The human team cheered and exchanged high fives. Success, Ju said. Another impossible repair completed. Later that day, as the Naraxi vessel prepared to depart, Sal approached Taeyong one last time. Our species has been traveling the stars for 3,000 years, the alien said. We developed our engine technology through careful, methodical research over centuries. And it's beautiful technology, Taeyong replied sincerely. Yet you fixed it with tape and tools that look like they belong in a museum. Taeyong smiled. Humans spent most of our history fixing things with whatever we had on hand. Before we had proper tools, before we understood the science, we still needed to make broken things work again. Your species is strange, Exal said, but the translator indicated a tone of respect. We're adaptable, Taeyong corrected. When the only tool you have is a hammer, you get really creative about what looks like a nail. As the Naraxi ship glided smoothly out of the dock, its engines now purring perfectly, Taeyong watched from the viewport. Behind him, 3 more alien vessels were waiting their turn for the human touch, that unique blend of intuition, improvisational thinking, and stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly unfixable. Human engineering wasn't about perfection, it was about persistence, and in a galaxy full of perfect but fragile technology, that made all the difference. 6 months after the Naraxi ship's repair, Orbital Dock 9 was almost unrecognizable. What had been a modest human repair station now sprawled across space, with new bays, workshops, and habitat rings extending in all directions. Ships from a dozen alien civilizations hung in orbit around it, waiting their turn for repairs. Captain Ju Park stood at the main viewport of the newly expanded command center, watching as yet another alien vessel was guided into Bay 12. Her once small team had grown to over 300 engineers, technicians, and support staff. Captain, Admiral Kelvin's shuttle is approaching, said Do-Yun from his communication station. Ju straightened her uniform. The arrival of a Galactic Union admiral wasn't something that happened every day, especially not one coming to personally investigate human repair capabilities. Tell Taeyong to meet us in the observation lounge, she said, and make sure the Zenturi repair is visible from there. Admiral Kelvin was tall and imposing, with silver-blue skin that seemed to shimmer under the station lights. As the most senior representative of the Galactic Union in this sector, his visit marked official recognition of what had been happening at Dock 9. Captain Park, he said, his translator rendering his complex language into smooth Korean. Your station has become quite famous, or perhaps infamous, depending on which species you ask. Juwoo bowed slightly. We're just doing our job, Admiral. Helping where we can. Indeed, his expression was unreadable. Yet what you call helping has disrupted several major repair corporations across 3 sectors. He followed her to the observation lounge, where floor-to-ceiling windows provided a perfect view of Bay 7. Inside, a team of human engineers worked on a massive Zentari vessel, its distinctive spiral hull gleaming under the work lights. Taeyong was waiting for them, along with Minji and Hyunwoo. All 3 bowed to the Admiral. What exactly am I seeing here? Kelvin asked, gesturing toward the repair bay. The Zentari ship Cosmic Harmony suffered navigation system failure while charting the Vega Nebula, Taeyong explained. Their quantum navigation core was exposed to radiation that scrambled its baseline settings. And the Admiral's tone was skeptical. According to Zentari technical protocols, the entire system should be replaced. It's designed to be a single integrated unit, but that would cost them approximately 20 million credits and 6 months of work. Below them, Jinsu and Woojin carefully extracted a spherical component from the ship's bridge section. It glowed with a soft purple light that flickered erratically. I don't understand, Kelvin admitted to Juwoo. Your species joined the Union barely 50 years ago. Your technology is derived from ours. By all measurable standards, you should be asking us for technical assistance. Juwoo smiled. Admiral, would you mind following me for a moment? She led him through the station's corridors to a special area near the main engineering section. The room they entered was different from the high-tech repair base. It looked almost like a museum, with various Earth artifacts displayed in cases. At the center sat an ancient Earth vehicle, a 1967 Chevrolet Impala, its black paint gleaming under carefully positioned lights. What is this primitive transport? Kelvin asked, though his tone held curiosity. This is what humans drove before we had anti-gravity, Juwoo explained. This particular car is over 250 years old, yet it still runs perfectly. Taeyong joined them, running his hand lovingly over the car's hood. My great-grandfather restored this. It had been abandoned in a field for 40 years when he found it. Rusted, engine seized, parts missing. And yet here it is, Juwoo continued. Before we reached space, we had to keep our machines running without fabricators, without perfect replacement parts, without quantum engineering. We learned to listen to engines, to feel vibrations, to smell when something wasn't right. But most importantly, she continued, we learned that nothing is truly irreparable if you're stubborn enough. The Admiral's expression shifted slightly, showing the first hint of understanding. Come, let me show you what we're doing with the Zentari system, Taeyong offered. Back in the repair bay, the humans had set up what looked like a bizarre combination of Zentari technology and jury-rigged human equipment. The navigation core now sat in a custom-built cradle, connected to various diagnostic devices. The Zentari designed this system to be perfect, Taeyong explained. But they also designed it to be replaced as a unit if it ever failed. They never developed repair protocols because their engineering philosophy doesn't include repair, only replacement. Jinsu approached with a report. We've isolated the damaged memory matrices, she told Taeyong. The radiation scrambled about 12% of the base navigational data. Can it be recovered? Kelvin asked, seemingly despite himself. Jinsu smiled. We're rebuilding it now. We've created a program that can reconstruct the damaged data by analyzing the pattern fragments that remain. That's not in any repair manual, the Admiral noted. No, agreed Taeyong, because we made it up yesterday. As they watched, the navigation core's erratic purple glow steadied, then brightened. A cheer went up from the human team. It's working, Minji announced. Navigation systems are coming back online. Current efficiency, 94.2% and climbing. The Zentari captain, who had been watching anxiously from nearby, made a gesture that translated approximately to disbelief. "This is impossible. The core cannot be repaired once compromised." "Impossible just means no one's figured out how to do it yet," Taeyong replied with a smile. Later in her office, Juwu showed Admiral Kelvin the station's repair statistics. "In 6 months, we've completed 342 impossible repairs," she said. "Average cost savings to our clients, 78% compared to replacement costs. Average time savings, 86%. The Admiral studied the figures silently before asking, "Why? You could charge much more for these services. You could even reverse engineer some of these technologies for human benefit." "We could," Juwu acknowledged. "But that's not why we're doing this." "Then why?" She considered how to explain. "Humans spent thousands of years just trying to survive on our one planet. We made tools from rocks and sticks. We built machines from whatever metals we could mine. Nothing was perfect. Everything broke eventually, but we kept fixing it all. When we fixed these ships, we're not just solving technical problems. We're showing the galaxy a different way of thinking, one that values resourcefulness and adaptation." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "The Union Council has received a formal petition," he finally said. 17 species are requesting that Earth be designated an official repair hub for the entire quadrant, with Union funding and support. Juwu's eyes widened. "That's unexpected." "Is it?" Kelvin tilted his head. "Your engineers just repaired a system that the Zentari themselves, who invented it, declared unrepairable. Word spreads, Captain Park, especially when ships that were given up for lost come flying home again." Before leaving, Admiral Kelvin paused at the viewport, watching as the repaired Zentari ship prepared to depart. "You said humans learn to listen to engines and feel vibrations," he noted. "But many species have more acute senses than humans." Juwu nodded. "True, but they trust their instruments more than their senses. We learned to trust both, and to question when they don't agree." "A useful perspective," the Admiral admitted. "Perhaps one the Union has been missing." As the Zentari ship smoothly glided out of the dock, its once-failed navigation system now functioning perfectly, Juwu couldn't help but feel proud. Humanity had found its place among the stars not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the simple, stubborn refusal to accept that anything was beyond repair. And somewhere in the vast universe, another alien ship was breaking down, its crew already plotting a course for the human repair station, where the impossible happened every day. The alert came during the night cycle, waking Captain Juwu from a deep sleep. The station's eye rarely used the emergency protocol for incoming ships. She squinted at the glowing message hovering above her bed. "Unidentified vessel approaching. Configuration unknown. Requesting immediate assistance." Juwu dressed quickly and made her way to the command center. The main view screen showed something unlike any ship she had seen before, a massive crystalline structure that seemed to shift and flow even as it moved. Its surface sparkled with countless points of light that pulsed in complex patterns. "Is that?" she began. "An archivist vessel," confirmed Doyun, his voice hushed with awe. "At least we think so." The archivists were more legend than fact to most species, an ancient race said to predate even the formation of the Galactic Union. They traveled the cosmos recording the history of intelligent life. Few had ever seen them. Fewer still had spoken with them. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies," said Doyun. "But it's strange." He activated the comm system. What filled the room wasn't a voice, but a symphony of sounds, lights, and sensations that somehow formed words in Juwu's mind. "Help. Vessel failing. Knowledge fading. Tell them they can dock in Bay 1. Juwu said after a moment of stunned silence. "And get Taeyong. Get everyone." By the time the archivist vessel maneuvered into the specially cleared bay, half the station was awake and watching. The ship moved awkwardly, its normally graceful movements replaced by jerky, uncertain motions. As it settled into the docking clamps, parts of its crystalline structure seemed to dim and brighten randomly. "It's beautiful," whispered Minji as their team approached the ship. "Even damaged, it's beautiful." A section of the vessel's hull rippled and then opened, forming an entrance. Light spilled out, coalescing into a humanoid shape that floated toward them. The Archivist Ambassador, a being composed of pure energy contained within a loosely defined form. "Thank you for receiving us," the being communicated, its thoughts forming directly in the humans' minds. "Our journey has become difficult." Taeyong stepped forward with a respectful bow. "We're honored by your presence. How can we help?" The light being flickered, its form momentarily destabilizing before regathering itself. "Our vessel has begun to forget itself. Its consciousness fragments. In 9 billion years of existence, we have never encountered this malfunction." Silence fell across the dock. The engineering team exchanged glances. This wasn't a mechanical problem or a software issue. It was something far more complex. "May we examine your vessel?" Taeyong asked carefully. The ambassador's light pulsed in what might have been assent. "Please, but hurry. The forgetting accelerates." Inside the vessel was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Instead of corridors and rooms, they moved through shifting spaces that seemed to respond to thought. Crystalline structures grew from surfaces that weren't quite solid, and energy flowed in patterns too complex to follow. Standard diagnostic tools proved useless. The vessel's technology was so advanced it might as well have been magic. After hours of frustrated attempts, the human team gathered to reassess. "We need a different approach," Taeyong said, running a hand through his hair. "This isn't just a ship. It's alive somehow." "More than alive," said Haiji Kang, who had been called in from her lab in the medical section. As a specialist in neural interfaces between humans and machines, she had been observing quietly. "It's conscious. The problem isn't mechanical failure. It's cognitive." She stepped forward to address the ambassador. "You're describing something like dementia or memory fragmentation. Your ship might be experiencing the equivalent of cognitive decline." The being's light brightened with interest. "Explain this concept." "In humans, cognitive decline happens when neural pathways break down or become tangled. Memories become harder to access. Processing slows." "Yes," the ambassador pulsed. "This describes the vessel's condition precisely." The revelation sparked a controversial approach, treating the living ship like a patient rather than a machine. Haiji requested specialists from Earth, neurologists, psychologists, and computer scientists. For 3 weeks, they worked alongside the engineers to establish a new kind of repair methodology. "The ship's memory structures are fragmenting," Haiji explained during one of their daily briefings. "It's like watching a mind slowly lose itself." Jung-Soo, a neurologist from Seoul University, nodded in agreement. "If this were a human brain, we'd be looking at ways to strengthen existing neural pathways and create new ones for lost functions." "But how do we do that for a crystalline consciousness?" asked Taeyong. Haiji smiled. "We build a bridge." Their solution was unprecedented, a neural interface system that would allow human minds to connect with the vessel's consciousness. Through this connection, they hoped to help the ship reorganize its fragmented memories and rebuild its cognitive architecture. "It's dangerous," Haiji warned the volunteers. "We don't know how connecting with a consciousness, this ancient and alien, might affect you." Despite the risks, 5 engineers stepped forward: Taeyong, Minji, Hyunwoo, Jinsu, and Woojin. The interface required special chambers to be built within the vessel. The humans would lie in these spaces while specialized equipment created a connection between their neural patterns and the ship's crystalline consciousness. On the day of the attempt, Captain Jiwoo watched anxiously from a monitoring station as the 5 engineers entered the ship. The archivist ambassador hovered nearby, its light pulsing with what might have been hope. "They're starting the connection," reported Doyun, watching the data streams. Inside the vessel, Taeyong felt his mind expanding outward, touching something vast and ancient. Images flooded through him. Stars being born, civilizations rising and falling, knowledge accumulated over billions of years. The others reported similar experiences, each connecting with different aspects of the ship's consciousness. "It's like an ocean." Minji's voice came through the comm. "An ocean of memories with no shore." For 3 days, the humans remained connected, helping the vessel sort through its fragmented memories. They became guides, helping the consciousness find pathways through its own vast knowledge. Sometimes they worked together, creating stronger connections between fragmented sections. Sometimes they worked alone, focusing on specific memory clusters. On the 4th day, something changed. The ship's crystalline structure began to brighten, its patterns becoming more regular and harmonious. The erratic fluctuations in its energy field stabilized. "It's working," Haiji said, watching the readouts. "The fragmentation is slowing, and some areas are showing signs of recovery." When the human team finally emerged from the ship, they looked exhausted but triumphant. Taeyong's hands trembled slightly as he accepted a cup of water from Juwoo. "What was it like?" she asked quietly. He stared into the distance, as if seeing things no human was meant to see. It was everything. The entire history of the galaxy, countless civilizations, knowledge beyond anything we could imagine. And we helped it remember itself. The archivist ambassador approached, its light now steady and bright. "You have done what we believed impossible. Our vessel remembers now. The knowledge is secure." "Will it happen again?" asked Haiji. "The forgetting." "Perhaps," the being acknowledged. "But now we understand it. And now we know where to seek help." Before departing, the ambassador presented Orbital Dock 9 with a gift, a small crystalline structure that hovered in the air, pulsing gently with inner light. "This contains knowledge we believe humans are ready to receive," the ambassador explained. "Star maps of regions unknown to your union, histories of worlds long vanished, and something else, a record of what you accomplished here." As the archivist vessel departed, its movements once again graceful and certain, Juwoo stood with her team watching it vanish into the depths of space. "We just repaired a living ship that's older than human civilization," Taeyong said, still sounding awed by what they had experienced. Juwoo nodded. "And in doing so, we've shown the galaxy something new about humanity." "What's that?" asked Minji. "That we understand that not all repairs involve fixing things," Juwoo replied. "Sometimes they involve healing." The crystal gift from the archivists was installed in a special chamber where researchers could study its contents, but its greatest value wasn't in the knowledge it contained, it was in what it represented. Recognition from the oldest known civilization, the humans had something unique to offer the galaxy. Not just the ability to fix machines, but the wisdom to help even the most advanced consciousness find its way back to itself. The Great Hall of Orbital Dock 9 had never held so many different species at once. Captain Juwoo Park stood at the entrance, watching as representatives from across the galaxy filed in. Some floated on anti-gravity fields, others walked on multiple legs, and a few existed as pure energy contained in specialized suits. All had come for the same reason: to witness the formal recognition of humanity's unique place in the galactic community. 6 months had passed since the healing of the archivist vessel. In that time, the station had become a pilgrimage site of sorts. Ships arrived daily, not just for repairs but to observe the humans at work. Apprentices from 24 worlds now trained alongside Taeyong and his team, learning not just technical skills, but a new way of thinking about technology. "Nervous?" asked Sunwoo, appearing at Juwoo's side in a freshly pressed uniform. She smiled. "A little. I never expected to be hosting the entire Galactic Union Council." "Well, you'd better get used to it," he replied. "After today, everything changes." At the center of the hall, a stage had been erected. Displays around it showed images of the various impossible repairs the humans had performed. The Trilari battlecruiser, the Naraxi scientific vessel, the Zentari navigation system, and most impressively, the archivist ship. Admiral Kelvin was the first to speak, his silver-blue form impressive against the backdrop of stars visible through the hall's transparent ceiling. For thousands of years, the Galactic Union has prided itself on technological advancement, he began. We measure progress by how perfectly our machines function, how rarely they fail. But the humans have shown us the flaw in our thinking. He gestured toward the displays. These repairs represent more than technical solutions. They represent a philosophy that many of us have forgotten, that failure is not an endpoint but a challenge to be overcome. Taeyong sat with his team in the front row, looking slightly uncomfortable in formal attire. Beside him, Heiji Kang had recovered fully from her time connected to the archivist vessel, though sometimes she still woke from dreams filled with ancient memories not her own. The next speaker was the Centauri High Engineer, a being whose species had once looked down on human technology as primitive. Now, it spoke with unmistakable respect. Before the humans showed us otherwise, my people believed that perfection was the only acceptable standard. When something failed to meet that standard, we replaced it. The humans taught us to see the value in imperfection, in learning from failure rather than discarding it. Throughout the hall, representatives nodded in agreement. The Nuraxi delegate raised all 6 hands in the gesture of profound truth. When it was Juwoo's turn to speak, she walked slowly to the center of the stage, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon her. "Thank you for this honor," she began simply. "But I want to clarify something important. What you've seen us do at this station isn't magical or even particularly advanced. It's actually very old." She tapped a control, and the displays changed to show images from Earth's history. Ancient humans making stone tools, medieval blacksmiths repairing armor, mechanics working on early automobiles, and a family patching a roof during a storm. For most of our history, humans couldn't just replace things when they broke. We had to fix them, often with limited tools and knowledge. This created a kind of stubborn creativity. We learned to see multiple solutions where others might see only one path forward. The hall was silent, all attention focused on her words. What looks like innovation to you is actually just human adaptation. We never expect things to work perfectly, so we're never surprised when they don't. Instead, we get curious about why they failed and how we might make them work again. After the speeches came the official proclamation. Admiral Kelvin, joined by the full Galactic Union Council, formally designated Orbital Dock 9 as the first Galactic Repair and Innovation Center. From this day forward, the proclamation read, "This station and its methodology will serve as the model for repair centers throughout Union space. Human engineers will train specialists from all member worlds in what shall now be known as the human approach to technological problem-solving." The ceremony concluded with a demonstration. In the center of the hall, Taeyong and his team had set up a repair station. Before the eyes of the gathered dignitaries, they tackled a problem that had stumped Kel collective engineers for decades, a quantum communication device that randomly lost coherence. The humans didn't use advanced diagnostic tools. Instead, they simply took the device apart piece by piece, examining each component with their eyes, ears, and hands. Taeyong even smelled one component, raising eyebrows, or equivalent sensory organs, around the room. Within 30 minutes, they had found the issue. A resonance pattern in the device's crystal matrix that occurred only under specific conditions. Rather than replacing the crystal, they modified it slightly, changing its structure to eliminate the resonance. When they activated the device, its communication field stabilized completely. The Kel representative's color shifted to deep blue, a sign of profound amazement in their species. Later, as the formal reception began, Juwoo found herself approached by a small group of young aliens, engineering students from various worlds who had been watching the humans work for weeks. "Captain Park," said one, a young Nuraxi whose 6 eyes blinked nervously. "We wish to formally request to join your next training cohort." "All of you?" Juwoo asked, surprised. "Yes," replied another, a floating orb of consciousness from the Mithril Collective. "We want to learn the human approach." Zhu smiled. It won't be easy. Our methods aren't very structured. That's exactly why we want to learn them, said the Naraxi student. Our teachers show us the right way to do things. You humans show that there can be many right ways. Across the room, Admiral Kelvin was speaking with Taeyong and Haiji. The Council has approved funding for 20 more repair stations based on your model, he informed them. They will be established along major trade routes, with human engineers leading each one. Taeyong looked startled. That's a lot of responsibility. Indeed, the Admiral agreed. But after what you accomplished with the Archivist vessel, the Council is convinced that humanity's approach to problem-solving is a valuable resource for the entire Union. Before the celebration concluded, the Archivist ambassador made a surprise appearance. Its luminous form drew all eyes as it floated to the center of the hall. We have observed many species across billions of years. It communicated directly to the minds of all present. Most follow predictable paths of development. Humans are different. They evolved not through perfection, but through adaptation. The being's light pulsed in what might have been amusement. They are the youngest species in this room, yet they repaired our vessel when we could not repair ourselves. This is because they understand something fundamental that many older civilizations have forgotten. And what is that? Asked Admiral Kelvin. That understanding how things break is as important as understanding how they work. As the reception concluded and the delegates prepared to depart, Zhu stood with her original team, Taeyong, Hyunwoo, Minji, and Doyun, at the main viewport. Below them, Orbital Dock 9 hummed with activity as ships from dozens of worlds waited for the human touch. I never thought fixing things would change the galaxy, Minji said softly. Taeyong laughed. We didn't change the galaxy. We just reminded it of something it had forgotten. And what's that? Asked Doyun. That the most advanced technology in the universe, Zhu replied, is useless if you can't fix it when it breaks. In the years that followed, human repair centers spread throughout Union space. Young engineers from Earth found themselves in high demand, traveling to distant worlds to teach their methods. Ships that once would have been scrapped were given new life. Systems considered irreparable were restored to function. Humanity had found its place among the stars not as conquerors or scholars, but as the fixers, the problem solvers, the ones who could keep the complex machinery of galactic civilization running. And in doing so, they had earned something more valuable than advanced technology: the respect and gratitude of every species that had ever faced a broken machine and wondered if it could ever work again.